My name is Elena Torres. I am 38 years old. I've hosted countless gatherings over the decades, but nothing ever concluded with me bolting the gate against my own sister. This one was meant to be effortless. Streamers draped from the oak branches. A lopsided dollhouse we'd assembled side by side in the shed. Vanilla cupcakes softening under the thick Texas afternoon humidity. 9-year-old girls twirling through the garden chanting spells and fairy riddles like the world hadn't yet learned to bruise. Lila had marked off the weeks on her calendar with stickers. She is 9 now. She is still soft at the edges. She still trusts that grown-ups mean what they say. She still holds wonder like a fragile bloom you shield from the wind. Days earlier, we'd frayed the corners of the invites with scissors to mimic enchanted scrolls. She handled them with such reverence, as if haste might shatter the spell. I needed her to feel cherished, sheltered, truly known. That fragile spell held for barely 3 minutes once my sister pulled up. Sophia has always commanded the air like a gathering storm. Talk hushes when she steps through. Folks shift their stance without a thought. She barely glanced at the dollhouse on arrival. Just gripped my arm like I was one of the servers. Trailing her came Victor, suited up as if for a gallery opening rather than a children's tea. Shades perched on his nose, tablet glowing, and Sienna, 11 years old, leggy and already versed in the art of disdain. She swept the garden with one look and declared, for all to catch, "Is this for toddlers or something?" A couple girls tittered. The uneasy ripple kids make when they sense the blade turning. Lila didn't titter. She stood in the garden's heart, clutching the tiny riddle scroll she'd illustrated herself. Her eyes met mine, puzzled, like she'd overlooked some unspoken code. I moved nearer, forcing a grin that stretched too wide. Victor edged by me wordless. Sienna wrinkled her nose at the fairy crowns and proclaimed she wouldn't touch that junk. Sophia merely lifted a shoulder and murmured, "You know preteens." I ought to have shut it down then, but I held back. Convinced myself it'd fade, that Lila was tough, that I was overreacting, the label my father slaps on whenever I refuse to swallow more. It didn't fade. The riddle trail. She blurted solutions before the others could puzzle them out. She deemed Lila's hints lame. She dubbed her a toddler right there amid the group. Once, she scaled the trellis, yanked the fairy crown from Lila's hair, and flung it into the live oak's upper limbs. "Real enchantresses don't whimper," she hissed. Lila didn't whimper. Not right away. She lingered till she figured eyes were elsewhere. I spotted her tucked beside the rain barrel, dabbing her cheeks with her hem like she didn't want to burden the day with her ache. Spotting me, she whispered, "Did I mess up somehow?" That sealed it. I strode back to the garden and announced to all it was time for treats. Victor seized the moment to launch a video chat. My parents lounged on the glider chairs nursing iced tea like harmony reigned. I positioned myself at the back steps as the line formed inside and then I spoke. "The gathering's done. Time to go." At first, they chuckled. My father even quirked a brow, that wry half-grin he deploys when he pegs me as overwrought. Sophia eyed me like I'd slighted her core. Victor seemed affronted, like I'd breached some unspoken code. I skipped the justifications. Just repeated, "You're not staying if tearing down my daughter counts as fun for you." Then I turned to my parents. I held their gaze. My mother blinked as though she'd tuned out. My father cocked his head and offered, "You always turn it into your spotlight." So I swung the gate wide. No raised voices, no spectacle, merely an open exit. They departed grumbling. My parents paused at the curb once, as if banking on my recall. I didn't budge. At 8:42 that evening, my screen flickered. "Elena, you're cut from this kin." I fixed on the words a solid minute. Then I typed back, "All right, then you're cut from the bakery ledgers, and now about the cash you still hold." The quiet that dropped was swift and absolute. Dawn the next day brought no olive branch. No voicemails laced with regret, no frantic dials, not a single of my father's curt thumbs-up icons, merely quiet, the brand my family wields when they anticipate my fold. I brewed tea and settled at the breakfast nook while Lila hummed in the sunroom. She donned a fresh fairy crown we'd snagged from the art supply store post-fiasco, a wordless mend, like we're erasing a scar without naming the cut. She was swaying gently, murmuring of woodland sprites and veiled glades, still grasping delight with open palms. And I resolved, no more. Not only in spirit, but in dollars, too. My parents owed me $45,000. I'd fronted it during the shutdown when their corner bakery teetered on collapse. My mother termed it a brief bridge. My father vowed it'd return to my coffers by quarters close. That was 3 years past. Since, they'd splurged on a remodeled kitchen, jetted to the Keys, funded Sienna's high-end violin intensive, the one she bailed from for sassing the instructor. Yet my funds had somehow slipped their minds, so I'd quit prodding. Instead, I'd begun shifting. First move, I locked 3 ledgers where I held cosign, the supply reserve and the catering float. Both under my name since my parents fumbled the inventory software from day one. I withdrew nothing. Just barred their access. Next, I rang our bookkeeper, Ramon. I'm pulling back from the shop, I informed him, as of now. A beat hung on the wire. Then he breathed out and said, frankly, I've braced for this. That evening, he dispatched my parents a crisp notice. Handover of duties, exit from ops, all polished, detached, done. I reached out to our prime flower vendor, the one who'd stretched terms on my word alone for prompt clears. I explained I was bowing out of the venture, that going forward deals required vetting sans my input. They chafed, but nodded. I was the steady hand, the decoder, the force rendering disorder presentable. By 1:30 that day, my mother pinged me. Ring us. We must discuss. You're airing bad. I left it unread. Instead, I ferried Lila to the nature preserve. We lingered beneath the canopy walk for 8 minutes, wordless. Then we rode the butterfly habitat thrice since Lila claimed it mimicked fluttering your ribs. I treated her to a stuffed Luna moth and gelato before supper. Back home, 4 alerts waited. 2 from Sophia, 2 from my father. Victor's message sat unopened. I erased it mid-sentence. At 8:05 that night, predictably, my father messaged. You're lashing out. We instilled more grace in you. A thread inside me gave way. Not fury, not grief, simply focus. I responded, no, you instilled silence while others trampled. You shaped me to mute my voice for ease. That's over. I want my $45,000 returned. No deposit, I'm filing claims. No reply came that night, but by 11:23 next morning, my app chimed. Deposit pending. $10,000. Miles shy of whole. Tacked on, hoping this mends it. I regarded the notice, unsurprised, merely hollowed. They weren't contrite. They were cornered, for what they'd truly forfeited wasn't merely my stake. It was their cover. I managed the overlooked orders, pursued the clients they'd alienated, mended ties with distributors, tallied figures they sidestepped. Absent me, they weren't admired. They stood bare. By week's close, the fissures turned overt. A distributor dialed me straight. Carla from Plains Grain. Though I'd severed from the shop name days prior, the bills lagged. Queries piled ignored, lines fed to silence. Still your point person? She probed. No, Carla, I said. Reach my mother. A hush fell. That's what I dreaded, she murmured. 3 days on, a catering client of 7 years axed their standing order cold. A terse closeout citing no-shows and blank replies. I relayed it to my father. His portal still lacked setup. My mother messaged. You figure wrecking us aids what? I stayed mute because I hadn't wrecked a thing. I'd ceased propping it all. That dusk, Sophia dropped a recording. I played it from the driver's seat post-market run. She labeled me narrow, spiteful, unhinged and feeling. Said Sienna was merely teasing, that Lila was overly frail, and perhaps I ought to reassess my parenting if a T-circle could shatter her. Then her tone dipped. This'll strike your folks deeper than you gauge, she added. You don't rebound from such a stab. As though I'd been the stabber. The shop hemorrhaged quicker then. Patrons dropped deals, tabs stacked, old hands queried aloud. A snapshot from a counter girl captured my mother jotting orders on napkins anew. My father rang her querying site revival steps. Then the gut punch in the community feed, a brief aside tucked low, but ruinous. The Library League severed ties post a catering flop at their book fair. The chair noted sloppiness and unmet bare minimums. I scanned it thrice, not for clarity, but knowing how it'd sting my mother, the woman who'd woven her worth from precision. For days hence, my father appeared at my stoop. Unsummoned, he just knocked like entitlement lingered. He seemed diminished, not frail, merely adrift. We've weathered a hard stretch, he ventured. We forwarded part of the sum. I can't grasp your further aim. I held off answering. Within, Lila perched her fairy crown on the armchair. I posed one query. What did Sienna whisper to Lila at the tea? Recall it even? He fell mute. After a spell, he said, you're pushing boundaries. She's merely young. The old shield, steeper toll. I eased the door shut. Later that evening, Sophia rang. She framed it as kin to kin, not sibling. Sienna had landed in guidance for taunting a classmate at lunch. When the advisor pressed on the source, she replied, "It's how grandma cuts through chatter." Sophia went still a long beat. Then she owned she should have reined it at the gathering. That she regretted it. And then she shared what I hadn't fathomed. Last season, my mother pitched in the shop's woes and swore they'd cleared my loan. Sophia loaned them $25,000. No receipts, pure faith. They'd strung us both along. Treated us like spigots, Sophia said. And cast you as the histrionic for resisting. 3 days later, an envelope reached Lila, contrition from Sienna. Lila perused it once and slipped it into her sketchpad. That night, my father dialed. I let it ring. Texted him instead. Speak with Sophia, then we might. For once, I wasn't pursuing fact. I let it pursue them unaided. Sophia rang me the following midday. Her tone rang altered, steadier, shed of the knee-jerk fealty she bore our parents. They owned none of it, she recounted. Mother dodged, father rambled off, but when I raised the $25,000, the air shifted. He claimed you envious and erratic. Said your flares were standard. Sophia refused the script. Told them retain the mixer, but reclaim every cent. I hold no faith in you two now, she stated, and exited. That instant, the frame truly buckled. Patrons yanked packed sans please. Past crew voiced doubts, not malice, mere bafflement. The shop, once steadfast, sagged beneath its own oversights. My mother penned me a note, actual ink on paper. She urged halt. Said I raised all she'd forged. Said remorse would find me. I smiled reading it because I'd grasped what she'd missed always. I wasn't raising the heritage. I'd been its brace. A fortnight on, my device hummed. Elena, we're shuttering the ovens. They alerted Sophia prior. She passed. Then me. I skipped the call. Sent an image instead. Lila curled on the rug amid her drawings, clutching Sienna's note with her fairy crown askew, a faint curve to her mouth. Beneath, I added one phrase. She's steady now. That's the core. 2 days passed, a draft cleared. $35,000 precise. Pinned was a slip in my father's even script. This settles our debt. We're sorry. I sensed no triumph. I sensed closure. The quiet after wasn't void. It was room. Lila was in the garden at midday stacking twig towers and fabric swatches. When I inquired her naming, she didn't pause. The unyielding one, she replied. That twilight, Sophia arrived at my walk with 2 teas. She passed me another envelope from Sienna. Briefer, warmer. A sketch nestled within. 2 outlined fairies, Queen Lila and attendant Sienna. I see now, Sophia ventured. You didn't splinter the bond. You quit bearing it solo. That Saturday, Lila and Sienna lingered side by side near 2 hours. No watchers, no barbs, just girls untangling knots. Sienna sketched Lila a fresh tower, dubbed Fresh Starts. Our parents shuttered the shop soon after and stepped back sooner than slated. I yet withhold from them, but rest deeper these nights because departing didn't crown me the foe. It revealed who trailed me free. It revealed who trailed me free. And in that quiet unraveling, I found something I hadn't chased in years, the shape of my own mornings without the echo of old debts. Lila's laughter carried from the garden now, unshadowed, as she wove more towers from the scraps we'd gathered, twigs from the live oak, swatches of silk from an old scarf, bits of ribbon she'd hoarded like secrets. She called the newest one the Whispering Spire, because, she said, it looked like it was telling stories to the wind. I watched from the kitchen window, the steam from my second cup of tea curling up like a question mark, and for the first time, the view didn't feel borrowed. It was ours. Wholly, without the invisible strings that had tugged from across town. Sophia and I started meeting for walks along the river trail the Sundays after. Not to mend everything, no, that would take seasons, maybe more, but to breathe in the same air without the weight of pretense. We'd park at opposite ends and meet in the middle, near the old iron bridge where the water rushed like it had places to be. The first time, she brought a thermos of chamomile, and I carried figs from the market, the kind that split open sweet and unexpected. We didn't talk about the shop right away. Instead, she asked about Lila's latest sketches, how the fairy crowns had evolved into full crowns of thorns and blooms intertwined. I told her about the one where Sienna appeared as a shadow sprite, not villainous, but watchful, guarding the glade's edge. Sophia's eyes softened then, the lines around them easing like fabric after a long press. She practices that in her journal now, she said. Drawing borders, not walls. By the third walk, the stories slipped out sideways. Sophia confessed how the loan had gnawed at her, not just the money, but the lie of it, the way our mother had framed it as a family knot, one pull and it all holds. I kept thinking if I let go, it'd drag me under too, she murmured, kicking a pebble that skipped 4 times before sinking. I nodded, remembering my own nights staring at the ceiling, the numbers in my head multiplying like worries. But letting go didn't drown us, I replied. It just showed the current was weaker than we thought. We sat on the bench after that, the one etched with initials from decades back, and she pulled out a small pouch. Inside were receipts, faded but intact, from the violin camp and the Keys trip. Burn them, she asked, half joking. I shook my head. Frame them. As the cost of clarity. Word of the shuttered ovens spread through town like pollen on a breeze, gentle at first, then settling everywhere. Neighbors who'd ordered birthday tears from us for years stopped by with casseroles and cards, not pitying, but puzzled, like they'd lost a landmark. Mrs. Herrera from the Library League lingered longest, her apron still dusted with flour from her own kitchen trials. Your mother's scones were the anchor at our fairs, she said, pressing a jar of peach preserves into my hands. But I always wondered why the orders came through you, crisp and on time, while the rest felt scattered. I smiled, tasting the irony like overripe fruit. I was the net, I admitted. Now they're learning to swim. She left with a recipe swap, her number scrawled on the lid, hinting at future collaborations, maybe a pop-up at the preserve, fairy-themed treats for the butterfly days. Lila noticed the shift too, in subtle ways that children clock before we do. One evening, as we sorted her drawings into a binder she decorated with pressed leaves, she paused on the Second Chances tower sketch. Is Sienna coming again? She asked, not hopeful exactly, but curious, like testing a door she wasn't sure swung both ways. I set down the glue stick. If you want. No crowns required. Her nod was small, but the next day, she added a side turret to the drawing, labeled For Shared Secrets. When Sienna arrived that weekend, backpack slung low with colored pencils peeking out, the air hummed different. No live oaks to conquer, just the garden table spread with paper and pastels. They started with maps of glades that folded into cities, where fairies bartered riddles for rain. Sienna's lines were sharper, precise, but she let Lila blur the edges with watercolor washes, turning boundaries into horizons. Our parents' retirement unfolded in fits and starts, the kind that come when plans were always more dream than blueprint. I heard from Ramon, the bookkeeper, that they'd downsized to a bungalow on the outskirts, the one with the wraparound porch my father had eyed since I was small. No more ovens to stoke at dawn, just bird feeders and books from the second-hand shop. The letter came a month in, handwritten on linen stock, my mother's script looping looser than before. The quiet is louder than I remembered, she wrote. We've planted herbs in pots as basil that curls like questions. If the air clears, perhaps a visit? For tea, not treaties. I folded it into my nightstand drawer, beside the check stub and Sophia's receipts. Not ready to reply, but not ready to burn. Clarity, I'd learned, wasn't a door slammed, it was a window cracked, letting in the light inch by inch. Jabari, no, Sophia, phoned one rainy afternoon, her voice muffled by the patter on her tin roof. They're asking about a reconciliation supper, she said, not pushing, just reporting. Dad's experimenting with grill marks on eggplant, says it's his new canvas. I laughed, picturing him in an apron too big, tongs wielded like a conductor's baton. Tell them we'll think on it. Lila's got a garden plot now, veggies shaped like spells. The line held a beat, then she added, and Sienna's been asking for that Luna moth story. The one where it leads lost queens home. We hung up with plans for another walk, the river higher from the storm, carving new paths through the banks. As autumn edged in, with leaves turning the trail to fire, I started my own small venture. Not a bakery, nothing baked into the old rhythms, but a workshop at the preserve, story circles for kids, where they built worlds from words and wire. Layla was my first apprentice, her towers evolving into installations that caught the light just so. The first session drew a handful, wide-eyed 6-year-olds with crayons clutched like wands, a shy 12-year-old sketching shadows. Sienna tagged along, not as attendant, but collaborator, her violin case swapped for a sketchpad. "This feels like the Riddle Trail, but without the rush," she whispered to Lila as they strung lanterns from branches. I stood back, heart full in that quiet way, watching them knot the strings, not too tight, leaving room for sway. The reconciliation supper happened on a crisp November evening, the bungalow's porch strung with paper lanterns that glowed like captured fireflies. Sophia and Victor arrived first, arms laden with wine and a pie from the market, apple, lattice-topped, a nod to what wasn't. Lila clutched her sketchpad like a shield, but her steps were sure. I knocked once, the door swinging in before my knuckles fell. My father stood there, sleeves rolled, apron smudged with char eggplants forgiving, he said by way of hello, eyes crinkling at the corners. My mother hovered behind, basil-flecked hands twisting a napkin. "The pots are thriving," she added, voice tentative as new soil. We ate under the lanterns, the table a mosaic of mismatched plates, his grilled slices fanned with yogurt drizzle, her herb salad dotted with pomegranate seeds like hidden jewels. Conversation meandered, the river's latest bend, Lila's plot yielding carrots twisted like question marks, Sienna's school recital where she'd played a piece called Veiled Glades. Sophia bridged the gaps, her stories of the walks weaving us without forcing. When the pie came, steam rising in curls, my mother passed me the knife. "Your cuts were always even," she said, not apology, but acknowledgement. I sliced deliberate, the crust yielding crisp, and as we passed the plates, the air thickened with the unsaid. Later, as plates cleared and stars pricked the sky, Lila tugged my sleeve. "Can we show them the Whispering Spire?" she asked, eyes on Sienna, who nodded fierce. We gathered in the yard, the small model she'd brought, twigs and silk under lantern glow, standing proud on the grass. My parents leaned in, my father's brow furrowing like he was reading blueprints. "Strong base," he murmured. "But the top, it's open." My mother traced a ribbon. "For the wind to carry stories through." Layla beamed. "Exactly. No walls, just whispers." That night, driving home with the porch light fading in the rear view, Sophia texted from the road ahead. One thread at a time. I glanced at Lila, asleep with her pad open to a new page, fairies circling a table, plates of pie in tiny hands. The road unspooled dark and open, and I thought of the old shop, its ovens cold now, but the warmth not lost, just reshaped, portioned out in smaller, surer servings. Winter settled soft that year, snow dusting the preserve like powdered sugar, turning the trails to hushed paths. The workshops grew, word spreading through the library league and market chats. I added evening sessions for parents, less building, more sharing, circles where we traded tales of what we'd outgrown. One night, a woman named Clara spoke of her sister's shadow, how it had dimmed her own light until she learned to step aside. Her voice cracked on the edge, and in the quiet after, my mother, yes, she'd come unannounced but welcome, reached for a tissue from her purse. "I've been the shadow more than I knew," she said later, over cocoa in the lodge. Not full confession, but a crack in the glaze. Sienna and Lila's friendship bloomed erratic, like weeds through pavement, playdates that stretched into overnights, arguments over whose map was truer, makeup sealed with shared gelato cones. Victor, ever the observer, started joining the walks, his tablet traded for a field guide to birds. "The herons here remind me of you too," he joked once, pointing to a pair skimming the water in tandem. Synchronized, but each with their own glide. Sophia elbowed him, but her smile lingered. By spring, the bungalow garden rivaled Lila's plot, rows of basil curling toward the sun, tomatoes blushing red. My father invited us for seeding, his hands steady in the dirt, showing Lila how to press the starts gentle, not force. "Roots find their way," he said, patting the soil smooth. She nodded, serious, then added a fairy pebble to the row. "For luck." He chuckled, the sound rusty but real. The full sum arrived in drips after that, another $10,000 wired on a whim, with a note, for the workshops. Grow what feeds. I banked it into a fund for Lila's art supplies, no strings. Sophia did the same with her remainder, pooling for a trip to the Keys, not luxury, but lessons in tides and trust. And me? I slept through the nights now, dreams less of ledgers, more of lanterns swaying. The family wasn't mended seamlesses, no, there were frays, patches where the light showed through different. But in those gaps, something new rooted, not obligation, but choice. Lila's towers stood taller in the garden, the unyielding one joined by kin whispering, second chances, now gathering glow. She named the latest open hearth, silk flames flickering in the breeze. One evening, as dusk bruised the sky purple, Sophia and I sat on the glider with teas cooling, watching the girls chase fireflies across the lawn. Victor sketched the scene from afar, my parents' voices carrying faint from a phone speaker, updates on the herbs, a recipe for lavender shortbread. This, Sophia said, gesturing to the sprawl, this is the real ledger. Balanced not in ink, but in the spaces we let be. Summer looped back humid and insistent, the air thick with cicada hum and the scent of Lila's new plot, zucchini swelling like secrets, sunflowers nodding tall. The workshops had taken root too, spilling from the preserve to pop-ups at the farmer's market, where kids bartered stories for seeds. Sienna had claimed a corner, her sketches trading for twine and tins, her once sharp lines softening into invitations. It's like the Riddle Trail, but everyone wins, she told a cluster of wide eyes one Saturday, her voice carrying that new steadiness. My mother started attending the parent circles regular, slipping in quiet with a thermos of her basil lemonade. She'd share snippets, not the heavy histories, but lighter loads, how the bungalow's porch swing creaked like a lullaby, or the way my father's grill experiments had birthed a neighborhood cookout circuit. One evening, as thunder rumbled distant, she lingered after. I used to think holding tight kept things safe, she confessed, folding a napkin into a fan. But your walk away, it loosened my grip. I poured her a fresh cup, the steam bridging our pause. Safe isn't tight, I said. It's the room to bend. Father's visits came sporadic, tied to Lila's asks, helping rig a birdhouse from scrap wood, or judging a fairy costume parade where Sienna strutted as a storm sprite, cape swirling. He'd arrive with tools in his truck bed, sleeves rolled, but his eyes would catch on the garden towers, lingering. Engineered whimsy, he'd mutter approvingly, then hand Lila a level from his kit. For the next one. Straight dreams build strong. Sophia and Victor hosted a midsummer soiree, not the rooftop mixers of old, but a backyard jam, lanterns from the porch nights, a playlist of folk tunes that meandered like the river, platters of market finds. The girls orchestrated a fairy hunt, clues tucked in jars along the fence, leading to a treasure of glow sticks and handwritten vows, to share maps, to blur edges. Our parents came, bearing the lavender shortbread, crisp and crumbly. Conversation flowed uneven, gaps where old habits tugged, but bridged by Lila's chatter on her latest installation, a mobile of pressed leaves and wire, spinning stories in the breeze. As the night deepened, fireflies pulsing like errant stars, Victor raised a glass. To the glides, he toasted, nodding to the herons we'd spotted that week. Laughter rippled, tentative then full, and in that swell, I felt the phrase knit not invisible, but visible scars that told. Autumn brought a harvest fair at the preserve, stalls groaning under pumpkins and pies, the air spiced with cider steam. Lila's workshop booth drew lines, kids queuing to craft leaf lanterns that bobbed like will-o'-the-wisps. Sienna manned the sketch station, trading portraits for promises of future plays. My parents volunteered the grill, father's eggplant skewers a hit, mother's herb dips whispered about. Sophia slung lemonade, Victor tallied the tales in a ledger of his own, not debts, but delights. That night, as booths folded and lanterns dimmed, Lila tugged us all to her centerpiece, a communal tower, built collaborative over weeks, twigs from family walks, ribbons from market swaps, a fairy crown at the peak woven by Sienna's hand. The gathering glow, she announced, lighting the base with a tea candle. Flames licked up gentle, casting shadows that danced not divide but unite. Winter whispered in early that year, frost etching the windows like lace. The circles shifted indoors, to the lodge's hearth room, where stories warmed against the chill. Clara returned often, her sister's shadow receding, and one session, she brought yarn for a weaving circle, threads of memory knotted into blankets. My mother took to it quick, her fingers deft from years of dough and dough alone. "This holds without holding," she said, passing a skein. Spring unfurled riotous, the river swelling with melt, banks blooming riot. Lila's plot overflowed, carrots straight as spells, sunflowers seeding the birds. The workshops bloomed too, a summer series announced, worlds unwound, for teens like Sienna, mapping not conquests, but constellations. And through it all, the quiet held, a rhythm not rushed, but resonant. Mornings mine, with tea and towers, evenings shared, lanterns low. The ledger balanced in breaths, in the bend of light through phrase, in the choice to stay open. And through it all, the quiet held, a rhythm not rushed, but resonant. Mornings mine, with tea and towers, evenings shared, lanterns low. The ledger balanced in breaths, in the bend of light through phrase, in the choice to stay open. By the time the next summer rolled around, heavy with the scent of river mud and ripening figs, we'd carved out a new kind of ordinary. Lila's workshops had become a fixture, not just at the preserve but spilling into school auditoriums and community barns, where kids from all over gathered to twist wire into worlds that didn't need walls to stand. She'd taken to calling them echo circles, places where stories bounced back softer, kinder. Sienna had stepped up as co-lead, her sketches now the maps that guided the builds, her once prickly edges filed down to something collaborative, like thorns turned to guides. Sophia and I kept up the walks, rain or shine, our strides sinking without effort now. Victor tagged along more, his field guide open to pages on migratory patterns, drawing parallels to how we'd all veered off course and found our way back. "Families are like those sandhill cranes," he'd say, pointing to a flock overhead. "They look chaotic from below, but up close, it's all instinct and lift." We'd laugh, the sound carrying farther each time, until one afternoon, as we looped back toward the bridge, my phone buzzed in my pocket, not with a demand or a debt notice, but a photo from my mother, the bungalow garden in full flush, basil spilling over pots, a cluster of cherry tomatoes gleaming red like punctuation marks on a long overdue sentence. "Come pick what you need," the caption read. No more, no less. We did, that weekend, Lila and I pulling up in the truck with empty baskets, the air humming with bees and the faint strum of my father's radio from the garage, old blues tunes that bent around the notes like they were forgiving themselves. He emerged wiping his hands on a rag, the lines on his face mapped deeper but settled, like rivers after flood. "These vines are stubborn," he said, handing Lila a pair of shears. "But give 'em space, and they climb." She snipped careful, filling her basket with herbs that bruised the air sweet, then turned to him with that direct gaze kids have. "Like towers?" He paused, then nodded slow. "Exactly like towers." The supper that followed wasn't planned, just inevitable, plates of grilled corn and eggplant drizzled with mother's yogurt sauce, passed around the porch table as dusk pooled gold at our feet. Sophia arrived with Victor and Sienna, the latter clutching a rolled sketch like a diplomat's scroll. Unfurling it revealed the whole sprawl, the river trail as a winding vein, the preserve dotted with spires, the bungalow a sturdy knot at the center, all threaded with faint lines of figures, us, stylized in motion, hands linked loose. "It's the map we didn't know we were making," Sienna explained, her voice steady, no trace of the old sneer. Lila traced the bungalow with her finger. "And the whispers go both ways now." Conversation wove easy after that, skirting the old craters but not denying them. My father spoke of the cookouts he'd started hosting, neighbors trading tools and tales over his latest grill fails turned wins. Mother shared a recipe tweak for the shortbread, lavender swapped for lemon verbena from her pots, brighter, less heavy. Sophia bridged with stories from her own shifts, how she'd cleared space in her schedule for more than mixers, picking up shifts at the market to sling stories alongside the figs. Laughter came in waves, cresting on Lila's recount of a workshop mishap, a tower topple that buried a kid in silk scraps, emerging giggling like a reborn sprite. As plates emptied and stars needled the sky, Victor fiddled with his phone, cueing a playlist that started soft, acoustic strums giving way to something with a beat, pulling Sienna and Lila to their feet for an impromptu dance on the grass, shadows stretching long and free. My parents watched from the glider, my mother's hand finding my father's knee, a quiet anchor. "We got the room wrong before," she murmured, not to me, but to the night. "Thought it was for hiding debts. Turns out it's for this." Driving home later, windows cracked to the cooling air, Lila hummed along to the fading tune, her head lolling against the seat. "That felt like a circle closing," she said, eyes half shut. I glanced over, the road silvered under moonlight. "Or opening wider." She smiled, sleep tugging at the edges, and in that breath, I felt it, the full weight lifted, not erased, but redistributed, lighter in the sharing. Months blurred into the easy cadence of seasons turning. Harvest fairs where our towers lit the midway, winter hearths crackling with shared yarns, spring plantings that doubled as family bets on who'd coax the straightest carrot. The old ledgers stayed closed, the money woven into futures, Lila's supplies, Sienna's summer arts camp, a group fund for the walks that stretched beyond the trail into day trips, chasing herons and horizons. And in the hush of those ordinary miracles, I realized the real inheritance wasn't the ovens or the oven's debts, but this, the art of leaving room. For whispers to carry, for towers to sway, for families to fray and rethread on their own terms. Lila's latest installation hung in the garden now, a mobile of silk and wire catching the breeze, a constellation of choices, spinning slow and sure. Hey folks, if you've stuck with me through Elena's journey, from those tangled family knots to the wide-open spaces they all found, drop a comment below. What hit home for you, or what's one tower you're building in your own life right now? If this story sparked something real, hit that like button, subscribe for more raw, heartfelt tales straight from the heart of everyday reinvention, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. We've got fresh stories dropping soon, ones about second act careers, quiet comebacks, and the kind of love that rebuilds from the roots up. Thanks for being here, your time means the world. Catch you in the next chapter, stay open, stay swaying. With all my heart.